Level 1, The Dreamer. You're 10 years old, and you're standing at the end of a public pier at 6 a.m. with your grandfather, who's been fishing this same stretch of water for 40 years. He hands you a rod that's too heavy for your arms and tells you to just hold it, feel the weight, get used to it. The ocean in front of you is gray-green and enormous, and somewhere out past the sandbar, he tells you, there are sharks. Not the movie kind, he says, the real kind. Blacktips mostly. Sometimes a bull shark if the water's warm enough. You don't believe him until an angler 3 spots down hooks into something that bends his rod almost to the water and screams line off his reel in a sound you've never heard before, a high-pitched whine that means something enormous is swimming away with his hook in its mouth. 10 minutes later, a 5-foot blacktip shark is thrashing in the shallows at the water's edge, gray and muscular, and completely alive in a way nothing on land ever looks. The angler works a hook out of its jaw with a long-nosed pliers, holds it steady in the wash for a moment, and lets it go. It disappears into the gray water like it was never there. You stand there with your too heavy rod, and you understand, with total clarity, that this is the only thing you want to do for the rest of your life. That night, you watch every shark fishing video you can find on a tablet under your blanket. You learn there are people who do this seriously, who target sharks specifically, who use meat as bait, and steal leaders so the shark's teeth can't cut through the line. You fall asleep with the tablet still playing. Level 2, The Beginner. You're 14, and you've saved birthday money and lawn mowing money for 8 months to buy your own surf rod, a 10-foot spinning setup rated for big fish, plus a second-hand reel that a tackle shop owner sold you for less than it was worth because he liked that you asked good questions. You don't have a boat. You don't have a kayak yet. You fish from the beach, which means you have to figure out how to get bait past the breakers without a boat, which means you learn about kayak bait deployment, or more realistically at 14, just casting as far as your arm and a heavy sinker will let you. Your first setups are wrong in almost every way. You use monofilament leader that a shark bites through in one snap. You use a hook too small for the size of bait you're throwing. You sit on the beach for 6 hours straight with nothing, not even a nibble, and you go home smelling like bait and sunscreen and disappointment. Your grandfather doesn't let you quit. He shows you how to rig a proper shark rig, a foot of number 19 wire leader crimped to a circle hook, no swivel close to the hook because a shark will chew through anything shiny. He teaches you that circle hooks are non-negotiable, that they hook the corner of the jaw instead of gut-hooking the fish, which matters if you plan on releasing it alive, which you do because your grandfather has drilled into you that the point isn't killing something, it's connecting with something. 3 months in, at 11 p.m. under a headlamp, because sharks feed better at night, your rod bends over hard and the drag screams, and your hands are shaking so badly you can barely keep the rod tip up. The fight lasts 20 minutes, you lose feeling in your forearms. When you finally drag it into the shallows, it's a 4-foot blacktip, and you're crying and laughing at the same time, and your grandfather is standing behind you with his hand on your shoulder, saying nothing, because there's nothing to say.
Level 3, The Pier Regular. You're 17, and you fish 4 nights a week from the same stretch of pier and the same stretch of beach, and you know the water now the way you know your own house. You know which sandbar holds bait fish at dusk. You know that a falling tide 2 hours before dark pulls bait fish out through a specific channel, and sharks stack up to ambush them there. You know the difference between a shark bite and a ray bite by the way the rod tip taps versus how it slams. You've upgraded your gear, a proper 12-aught circle hook, 300-pound test leader, a reel with a drag system strong enough to actually stop something that weighs more than you do. You've also learned the culture. There's a loose community of land-based shark anglers who fish this same coastline, and they don't hand out respect for free. The first time you show up with your new rig, an older angler who's been doing this for 20 years looks at your setup and tells you, without much diplomacy, that your leader is too short and your hook is going to gut a fish that could otherwise be released healthy. You take the correction instead of getting defensive, and that's the moment he decides you're worth teaching. He shows you how to properly handle a shark in the shallows, how to keep it in the water as much as possible, how to support its body weight so its own organs don't crush it under gravity, how to revive it by walking it forward through the water so oxygen moves across its gills before release. You learn that big fish, caught badly, is just cruelty with a fishing rod attached, and that the anglers who last in this sport are the ones who understand that the shark's survival after release is the actual measure of success, not the length of the fish or the size of the photo. Your first real test comes on a June night when something takes your bait and simply does not stop pulling. 45 minutes into the fight, your arms are done, your legs are shaking, and the other anglers on the beach have gathered behind you, offering advice you can barely process. When you finally get it into the wash, it's a 7-foot bull shark, thick through the body, and it takes 4 of you to safely support it for the 10 seconds you need for photos before releasing it back into the dark water. You don't sleep that night. You replay every second of the fight in your head until the sun comes up. And if you've made it this far in the journey, hit subscribe right now because the fish only get bigger from here. Level 4, the boat owner. You're 21 and you've bought your first boat, a 19-foot center console you found for less than it was worth because the previous owner had let the engine sit too long and needed someone patient enough to recommission it. You spend 3 weekends just getting the motor running properly before you ever put a line in the water. The boat changes everything about how you fish. You're not limited to what you can cast from shore anymore. You can run offshore to structure, wrecks and ledges where the bigger sharks actually live. Tiger sharks, hammerheads, occasionally something even bigger passing through on a seasonal migration. You learn to read a fish finder properly, distinguishing bait balls from structure from the specific hooked signature of a large predator holding near the bottom. Your first offshore trip alone is humbling in a way pier fishing never was. You anchor over what you think is good structure, chum the water with a mesh bag of ground menhaden, and wait for 4 hours with nothing. You learn that offshore shark fishing rewards patience differently than shore fishing does, that the ocean out there doesn't care how much gear you bought or how badly you want to fish. Your first hookup offshore comes on your 6th trip, and it's immediately clear this is a different category of fight. The fish takes drag steadily for 10 straight minutes without slowing, a run that would have emptied your old shore reel completely. You have to chase it with the boat, engine and gear, following the fish so it doesn't spool you. 90 minutes later, sweat-soaked and shaking, you bring a 10-foot tiger shark alongside the boat, its pattern of dark blotches visible even in the low light, its tail sweeping water in slow, powerful arcs. You don't boat it, you never intended to. You cut the leader as close to the hook as you can safely reach, and it swims down and out of sight. You sit down in the boat and just breathe for a long time.
Level 5, the tournament angler. You're 25 and you've entered your first shore-based shark tournament. A catch, photograph, release format where teams are scored on species diversity and estimated length rather than kill weight. A format that's become standard as the community has shifted away from the old harvest tournaments of decades past. You've built a 2-person team with a friend from the Pier community, and you spend the 2 weeks before the tournament pre-fishing obsessively, testing bait combinations, scouting which stretch of beach is holding fish that week. Tournament fishing is different from recreational fishing in ways that surprise you. The pressure changes your decision-making. You second-guess rigs you've used successfully for years. You watch other teams set up beside you and feel the specific anxiety of a competitive environment layered on top of a sport that used to be pure solitude. Your first tournament goes poorly. You manage 1 small blacktip and 24 hours of fishing, while teams around you land multiple sharks, including a spinner and a nice-sized lemon shark. You finish outside the top 10. You don't quit. You go back to basics, review your logs from 2 years of fishing this stretch, and realize you'd been fishing the wrong tide stage for this particular tournament's dates. Your second tournament, 6 months later, you land 4 sharks in the 24-hour window, including a 9-foot hammerhead that draws a small crowd on the beach just from the fight alone. A shark whose hammer-shaped head cuts visibly through the surface as it makes its final runs in the shallows. You place third overall. Your name starts appearing in the small but real community of competitive land-based and near-shore shark anglers along your coastline. People you don't know start recognizing your username on fishing forums. Level 6, the Charter Captain. You're 29 and you've turned the thing you love into the thing that pays your bills. You got your captain's license 2 years ago, added insurance, and built a small charter business specifically around shark fishing trips, catch and release, educational in nature, targeting the growing number of people who want to experience hooking a large shark without needing to own a boat or spend years learning the skill themselves. The professional environment reveals things recreational fishing never taught you. When it's a paying customer's first time on a boat and they're seasick and terrified and also holding a rod connected to something that outweighs them, your job is not just finding fish, it's managing an entire experience, safety, expectations, the physical handling required to keep both the client and the shark safe during the fight and release. You develop a reputation for a specific kind of trip, families with kids who want to see a shark up close in a controlled, safe way, which means your bait presentations, your leader strength, and your release protocols all have to be flawless every single time because you can't afford a bad outcome, not for the shark and not for your business. A junior mate you trained from nothing, a 19-year-old who showed up at your dock asking for an unpaid apprenticeship because he wanted to learn, is now better at leadering a shark boatside than most captains twice his age, because you taught him the way you were taught. Correction without ego, patience with beginners, respect for the animal above the photograph. Your slow season teaches you the business side, insurance renewals, boat maintenance during the off months, marketing to a public that mostly still thinks of sharks as something to fear rather than something to protect. You spend hours explaining to nervous first-time clients that recreational shark fishing done properly, quick fights, minimal air exposure, proper release technique, has a survival rate north of 95% for most coastal species. That you are not hurting these animals, you are creating advocates for them one boat trip at a time.
Level 7, the respected name. You're 34, and the regional shark fishing community knows your name the way it knows the names of the 2 or 3 other serious, credible anglers who've been doing this at a high level for over a decade. You started tagging sharks for a university research program, working with marine biologists and need recreational anglers to help collect data because their research budgets can't fund enough boat time to gather it themselves. You learned to insert a small dart tag near the shark's dorsal fin in the 15 seconds you have it boatside, recording species, estimated length, sex, and GPS coordinates before release. Data that eventually feeds into migration studies that matter to people who will never once step on a boat. You've also become the person other anglers call when something goes wrong, a hook set too deep, a shark that won't revive properly in the shallows, a tourist who's hooked something far bigger than they know how to handle. You get a call one August evening from a panicked weekend angler on the beach who's hooked into something enormous and has no idea what to do. You drive 40 minutes in the dark, wade into the surf in your clothes, and help him fight and safely release what turns out to be an 11-foot bull shark, the largest either of you has ever seen this close to shore. You don't take credit publicly. You help because someone helped you when you were 17 and didn't know what you were doing either. Your body has started showing the cost of a decade and a half of this, your lower back from thousands of casts and fights, your hands calloused and scarred from leader wire and hook removal, a permanent tan line that doesn't fade in winter anymore. Level 8, the record chaser. You're 40, and you've spent 3 years specifically pursuing an IGFA line class record for a species you've caught dozens of times casually, but never under strict tournament documentation. Certified scale, witnessed weigh-in, verified line test. You studied the current record holders' methods, the specific structure they fished, the time of year, the exact leader specifications that qualify under IGFA rules. Chasing a record changes how you fish entirely. Every detail matters in a way it never did when you were just fishing for the experience. Your line has to be tested and verified before the trip, your hooks have to meet exact specifications, you need photographic and video documentation of the entire fight from hookup to release, because a record claim without proper documentation is worthless, no matter how big the fish actually was. Your first 2 attempts end in nothing. One broken leader from a fish that simply outclassed your gear, one fish that measured just under the existing record after an agonizing 90-minute fight that leaves you physically unable to close your hands properly for 2 days afterward. The 3rd attempt, on a cold January morning that you almost canceled because of weather, produces a fish that takes over 2 hours to bring boatside, a shark so large that landing it safely without harming it requires 3 people working in careful coordination in the dark. When the measurements are verified and the paperwork is submitted, and months later the record is officially certified, you don't post about it immediately. You sit on your boat afterward, alone, and think about the 10-year-old standing on a pier with a rod too heavy for his arms, not quite believing his grandfather's stories about what lived past the sandbar.
Level 9. The Legacy. You're 52 now, and most of your fishing time goes to teaching, not chasing personal records anymore. You run youth clinics twice a year with the same tackle shop owner, now in his 70s, who sold you your first reel at a discount because he liked your questions. You've trained a dozen younger anglers who now guide their own charters or work with research programs the way you once did, some of whom have surpassed anything you accomplished, which doesn't bother you at all. It's the entire point. The knowledge you spent 40 years accumulating moves faster through them than it ever could have moved through you alone, because you're organizing and transmitting it deliberately instead of making each of them discover it independently through decades of trial and error. You still fish, but differently now. Patient rather than hungry, present rather than chasing. You take your own grandchild out to the same pier where it all started for you, hand her a rod that's too heavy for her small arms, and tell her to just hold it, feel the weight, get used to it. She doesn't understand yet what's out there past the sandbar. You tell her anyway, the way your grandfather told you, and you watch her stare out at the gray-green water like she's trying to see something that isn't visible yet, but that she already, somehow, believes is real. And somewhere right now, a kid is standing on a pier at dawn, holding a rod too heavy for their arms, watching a stranger fight something enormous in the shallows, not knowing yet that this single, ordinary morning is about to become the beginning of everything.